Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, June 1st. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and we begin with breaking news. Another day of demonstrations, including one that began at Balboa Park this afternoon. It comes as President Trump, a short time ago, threatened to deploy the military unless states halt violent protests. Let's begin our coverage right now with KPBS reporter Andrew Bowen. Andrew, what are you seeing and hearing right now from your vantage point?
Thanks, Maya. I am here at the West Mesa of Balboa Park. There are several hundred young people who are right behind me right now, and they're all sitting in a circle, and it's kind of an open mic situation. We've had lots of young folks, mostly black folks, come up and share their experiences being black in San Diego, experiences with racism. Some of them have read poems, some of them have read scripture, and they're all just basically here to say that Black Lives Matter. Now, earlier this march did start with a march through downtown, and then they made their way to this portion of Balboa Park. I did speak with a young woman, 19 years old. Her name was Destiny, and she told me that she's here because she doesn't want to have to teach her children, her young black children, to be afraid of the police and how to avoid confrontations with the police. But again, overwhelmingly peaceful demonstration here in Balboa Park. The police have closed off a portion of 6th Avenue here. We're at the corner of 6th Avenue and Laurel Street. Unclear exactly how long this will last, but absolutely no violence here. Completely peaceful demonstration of young people in Balboa Park.
And late this afternoon in the Rose Garden, President Trump sternly warned the nation's governors to stop violent protests, or he'd bring in the military to do it. The president recommended each state call out the National Guard and, quote, establish an overwhelmingly law enforcement presence. His comments came as police used tear gas to disperse protesters outside the White House. And local leaders calling for peace. This comes after demonstrations downtown led to chaos and looting overnight. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman was there and has more on today's cleanup.
This AT&T store off Broadway downtown, this is what used to be windows here. Now it's covered with these wooden boards. Now our cameras were here last night as protesters smashed these windows and started looting inside the store. About a dozen people broke into the store and ran out with what appeared to be boxes of phones and accessories. Just up the block, CVS off Broadway was also broken into and looted.
Disgusting.
We saw people taking alcohol from the store. Some people appeared to be trying to stop others from getting inside, but it didn't work. Today, crews were out boarding up the CVS. Just down the street, this empty building with a very loud alarm had multiple windows broken during the night. Demonstrators also vandalized the espresso shop next door. Today, volunteers were out helping repair the damage.
I was out on the run. I saw the city had brooms and buckets out for us, so I figured why not, take the time I have right now and try to get back.
I was just kind of watching what was going on, and just something always rubs me the wrong way about people who have nothing to do with the situation being victimized by stuff like this. There was no reason to come and break windows here. Like, what did this vacant building have anything to do with, any of the injustices going on or anything?
Across the street, another CVS had nearly all of its windows broken. Crews were out overnight trying to board up the windows. Today, more work is still being done to secure the storefront. Police had a few clashes with demonstrators during the night. San Diego police say over 100 people were arrested and booked into jail on charges ranging from failure to disperse, vandalism, and assaulting officers. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Members of San Diego's Black community and allies called out the police response to protests this weekend. KPBS reporter Shalina Chatlani says leaders demand changes like a policing community review board.
Leaders say law enforcement's response to the weekend protests were more forceful and violent than necessary. San Diego County Democratic Party Chair Will Rodriguez Kennedy says police used non-lethal weapons, but in ways that were dangerous and targeted toward people of color.
So it was peaceful up until the middle of the day. What changed? The change was when they ended at their march at the Hall of Justice, and the San Diego Police Department marched 50 uniformed combat armored troops, basically. They looked like troops. I'm a Marine veteran. I can tell you they looked like troops into a contained space.
The protests this weekend were largely peaceful until tension grew toward the evening. Protesters threw water bottles at the police, and the police responded with tear gas and pepper bullets. Deputy Public Defender Genevieve Jones-Wright said she doesn't want to see more protests, but laws and policies to fight systemic racism and police brutality.
I don't want police chiefs and other people to simply send their condolences and to say we must do better as a profession. I want them to stand up. I want them to publicly support and endorse a mechanism that will actually provide a check on their profession to ensure that they do better.
Community leaders are asking for policing changes like a community review board and a ban to the chokehold. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
And a short time ago, San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulkner spoke about the recent unrest and the concrete changes that will be made locally.
This morning, Council President Gomez, Councilmember Montgomery, Chief Neslight, and I met with community members about this topic. And the chief announced that he will be stopping the use of the carotid restraint technique in San Diego Police Department, effective immediately.
Mayor Faulkner says emergency meetings will be held this week to discuss police practices and community relations. He's encouraging the public to participate if they choose to do so. The mayor and police chief Dave Nislight and the city encourages peaceful protests, but will take swift action to stop any violence or looting. The city of La Mesa just announced another curfew starting at 7 o'clock tonight and will be lifted at 5:30 tomorrow morning. It comes 2 days after protests against police violence and looting. KPBS reporter Joe Hung looks at how many are hoping to heal in the aftermath.
On Sunday morning, La Mesa was covered in ash, graffiti, and broken glass. Played Against Sports, a sporting goods store, was completely flooded after a fire inside the building left the sprinklers on for 5 hours.
I got a call from one of my employees who lives nearby that chaos was kind of ensuing here.
Daniel Buxton is the owner of the store.
So fire damage, flood, bats were used to destroy as much stuff as they could. All the computers are destroyed, all that.
But as soon as the city's curfew was lifted at 7 a.m. Sunday morning, residents emerged with brooms and trash bags ready to help.
All that stuff needs to be happy.
By Monday, things looked much better at Played Against Sports and the rest of downtown La Mesa.
People just immediately started getting to work and pitching in.
Colin Parent is a La Mesa city councilman.
When I came out on Sunday morning and saw a bunch of people, carrying brooms and buckets and chipping in, it was certainly very heartening, but not even a little bit surprising. That's just how La Mesans are.
The East County Chamber of Commerce has set up a GoFundMe page that reached its goal of $50,000 within 24 hours. As of Monday afternoon, it's raised almost $90,000. But while the city is recovering, one protester has complaints about how he was treated by police.
I did get tear gas in my face, over 5 times.
Omar Benchacrone is a La Mesa resident who participated in the protest.
Instead of hearing our pleas and listening and putting down their weapons, they use those weapons and try to run us off. So it's just, I don't know what to do next because I think we can't move on until this situation at hand has been resolved.
Parents said officials will continue investigating how the protest got so violent.
I'll just have to invite people to exercise some patience as we get those things collected, and just assure people that we're going to be as open and transparent about it as possible, so that people have a sense and confidence about what government's doing on their behalf.
Joe Hong, KPBS News.
And the cities of El Cajon and Santee have extended their curfews for another day. El Cajon's curfew will be in effect from 7 p.m. until 5:30 a.m. tomorrow. In Santee, the curfew will be in effect from 8 tonight until 6 a.m. and then in Poway, 8 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. With all the demonstrations, health officials are hoping the lack of social distancing won't help spread the coronavirus. They're urging people to continue to be careful and to cover up. Meantime, new numbers just released show no new deaths in the county, but there were 73 new cases, bringing the county total to 7,554. Today in Sacramento, Governor Newsom called for calm in the wake of the protest. More now from KPBS reporter Steve Walsh.
Where is humanity? Where is it? We can't breathe.
After a weekend that included widespread and largely peaceful protests, followed by instances of rioting and destruction, including in La Mesa and San Diego, Governor Gavin Newsom spoke Monday about the need to tackle systemic racism.
For those of you that are out there protesting, I want you to know you matter. And I want you to know I care, we care. And I don't want to just demonstrate that rhetorically. I want you to know that I have a unique responsibility to prove that to you, not just assert it. You've lost patience, so have I. You are right to feel wronged.
Newsom was one of the governors in a private call with President Trump Monday morning, where the president reportedly called Democratic governors weak and urged them to crack down more forcefully. Newsom says he doesn't want to be drawn into a fight with the White House.
I could choose to go back and forth and just be another voice in that cause, or I can choose to focus a message that I think is so much more powerful.
The state is responding to the violence by deploying California Highway Police and roughly 4,500 National Guard. Newsom says he is only sending assistance on the request of local authorities as part of a coordinated effort. During the county's briefing on COVID-19, supervisors Nathan Fletcher and Greg Cox echoed some of Newsom's sentiments. Cox says he was sickened by the image of George Floyd coming out of Minneapolis, but Cox deflected questions about the county's response, saying any questions should be directed to the sheriff. That includes the rules for using projectile weapons against protesters, as happened over the weekend.
At this point, it's really more of an issue to let the sheriff deal with those other law enforcement agencies and trying to make sure that people can protest in an appropriate manner, but at the same time that we maintain order in the community.
The number of deaths in San Diego County from COVID-19 remains unchanged at 269. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
People with underlying health conditions face a greater risk of death from COVID-19. KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento says a review of local data for at least 250 COVID deaths with underlying conditions shows the most common was hypertension.
Data from the county shows at least 152 people had the condition, but most of them also had at least one other ailment. Infectious disease specialist Dr. Christian Ramers is an assistant medical director at Family Health Centers of San Diego. He says the virus infiltrates the body through a human cell receptor that is also the target of medication to treat hypertension.
And we do know that this receptor has something to do with hypertension. So a lot of the medicines that we use to treat hypertension are what's called ACE inhibitors, or angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors. So that may be one reason why hypertension is at the top of the list. There may be a relationship between people that have hypertension and the density of these receptors in certain parts of the body.
The county would only provide aggregate data on the underlying health conditions, and people may have had more than one. Other top conditions among those who died include diabetes, dementia or Alzheimer's, and heart disease. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
And several more people who died from the virus also had underlying health conditions but were not reflected in the county data. UCSD announced today that $1 million was donated to help in the quest to understand the virus and develop new ways to track and treat it. The gift was from the John and Mary II Foundation and will support the clinical research of virologist Dr. Davy Smith. Through sequencing the virus, Dr. Smith is able to track it as it spreads, which helps with contact tracing. And Dr. Smith said the gift will now enable his team to continue their research. We're following all of the latest coronavirus developments for you at kpbs.org. Just click on the Tracking COVID-19 link on our homepage, and you'll be taken to a page with all of our recent reports. We're in for more warm weather over the next few days, but a cool down is in sight. Mark Mancuso has your forecast.
Well, here we go again. Temperatures on the rise next couple of days. We have a warming trend through Wednesday. Looks like the heat will peak on Wednesday. Of course, we'll have our usual night and morning clouds, coastal areas, and also a little bit of fog. For the end of the week, an upper trough moves across the area, and it does look like it'll be significantly cooler on Friday. Well, we have that trough sitting offshore, and we've had some pleasant weather here out across the southwest to start off the week, right down here into Southern California. Next couple of days, though, it does look like our temperatures will be climbing. Overnight tonight, some clouds to the coast, down to 57 Oceanside, San Diego 64. Borrego Springs 73 tonight, and Mount Laguna 55. Checking on the conditions next couple of days, this upper low just kind of sits here. And looks like it's heating up again in the interior sections. Already excessive heat watches out in Arizona. As we take a look at our temperatures, they'll be on the rise. We're up to 106 Borrego Springs. Campo's up to 90. El Cajon is at 87. And tomorrow's high in Ramona, 86. Oceanside, 76. San Diego, 75. So there it is, the upper low. That'll be sitting and spinning, but then it starts to make a move into our area on Friday, and then that will lift northeast. We still have general troughiness, so no big warm-ups right after it. Looking at our temperatures next couple of days, yes, it's warm, morning clouds, afternoon sun, and then we'll see the cooling coming in here on Friday. Checking out the interior sections, we'll see temperatures warming up to 88 on Wednesday, but noticeably cooler. Only in the mid-70s on Friday. In the mountain regions, we'll see a warm Wednesday, but significantly cooler on Friday, and pretty much the same scenario in the deserts. It's hot, and then it turns cooler on Friday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
Today, the medical examiner listed George Floyd's death as a homicide, saying his heart stopped while police restrained him and compressed his neck. Floyd's family and others gathered today at a memorial where he died 1 week ago. A white Minneapolis police officer held his knee on Floyd's neck for several minutes, ignoring his pleas that he couldn't breathe. Floyd's brother is calling for peace.
Now what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? Y'all doing nothing. Because that's not going to bring my brother back at all. Let's do this another way. Let's stop thinking that our voice don't matter. That's right. And vote. There you go. Not just vote for the president, vote for the preliminaries.
Attorney is calling for a first-degree murder charge against Officer Derek Chauvin and for 3 other officers to be charged.
Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
Some businesses in Poway reopened today after demonstrators gathered there last night. Walmart among those that boarded windows, but the protests proved peaceful. Once again, city leaders late today announced another curfew at 8 p.m. tonight. And it was a weekend of protest, unrest, and destruction in San Diego County. Glass, tear gas, and sirens cascaded down the streets of downtown San Diego and La Mesa as San Diegans joined protests across the county. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler shows us a timeline of the weekend's events.
On Saturday, thousands of people came together in a protest march in La Mesa.
No justice, no peace!
They were there to protest not only the deaths of George Floyd in Minneapolis and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, but also a recent incident where a white La Mesa police officer repeatedly shoved a young black man while making an arrest at the Grossmont trolley station. Protester Roberta Tatum came to speak out against acts of police brutality and put it in a larger context.
I have been seeing this all my life. I'm 70 years old, and it's never stopped. Because of social media, we're getting some attention, and we need to understand, if the law do not start protecting black people, I don't know what's going to happen.
The march peacefully wound through University Avenue, eventually arriving at Interstate 8. After a brief conversation with California Highway Patrol officers, protesters made their way onto the highway and blocked traffic for hours. When protesters returned to the La Mesa Police Department, San Diego County Sheriff's deputies had arrived to block the entrance. A few minutes of tense standoff. Protesters ran into the street as volley after volley of tear gas and projectiles rained down from deputies on the roof of the police station. One woman was shot in the eye. A few hours later, after police cleared the parking lot in front of the police station, cars burned. Soon, people who may not have been part of the original group of protesters began breaking windows and taking things from stores. Banks burned. A peaceful march in La Mesa had somehow become a vehicle.
And we appear to be having some technical issues with that. Protesting CEO Mark Zuckerberg's decision to act on President Donald Trump's social media posts, some Facebook employees today chose to not work. The virtual walkout comes after controversial posts from the president referencing violent protests in cities across the country. One employee disagrees with Zuckerberg's do-nothing approach to the president's posts, saying there isn't a neutral position on racism. The company did not retaliate against the staff participating in the walkout.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, unrest in the U.S. Protests across the country call for justice as pockets of violence erupt in the streets. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Drug maker Gilead Sciences says a study shows the antiviral drug remdesivir can help patients with moderate COVID-19 pneumonia recover. A study of 600 patients found those given a 5-day course of the drug were 65% more likely to see improvement after 11 days. The results have not yet been published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. Gilead says in the coming weeks it plans to submit the study for publication. We've heard a lot about antibody tests that are supposed to determine a past infection of COVID-19. But now, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says those tests are not always reliable. Mandy Gaither has more.
Antibody tests to determine if a person has had a past infection of COVID-19 may be wrong up to half of the time, the CDC now says.
I don't think that we should be making any decisions using those antibody tests.
Dr. Sanjay Gupta says a lot of the antibody tests initially put out weren't good. The FDA has since put out a policy requiring antibody test makers to submit emergency authorization requests along with proof the tests work.
False positive is the worst kind of result, right? Because then you think, well, I've got the antibodies, I'm good to go. You're not, and so the tests aren't good enough right now.
The CDC says health officials or healthcare providers using antibody tests need to use the most accurate tests they can find and might need to test people twice.
Also, we still don't know the exact meaning of what the antibodies are going to provide in terms of how long people would be protected as a result of having these antibodies, how strong that protection would be. It's likely they're going to have some protection, but we just don't know the extent of it yet.
For today's Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
And an update now on our top stories. We're closely following protests across the county, which have led to curfews in a few cities, but not the city of San Diego. Today, Mayor Kevin Faulkner announced the San Diego Police Department will stop using the carotid restraint technique, effective immediately. And also today, a large and peaceful protest ended up in Balboa Park. About 150 people, mostly students, spoke out against police violence. And this afternoon, President Trump sternly warned the nation's governors to stop violent protests, or he would bring in the military to do it. The president recommended each state call out the National Guard and, quote, establish an overwhelmingly law enforcement presence. And a reminder, the cities of La Mesa, El Cajon, Santee, and Poway have extended their curfews for another day. El Cajon's curfew will be in effect from 7 p.m. until 5:30 a.m. tomorrow. And then in Santee, the curfew will be in effect from 8 tonight, and that's until 6 a.m. in the morning. And then also in Poway, 8 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. The astronauts who lifted off on a SpaceX rocket over the weekend are now at the International Space Station.
You know, we've had a really rough couple of months, and just to be able to to show the country what the agency's made of, what the Commercial Crew Program did, and what SpaceX did. I hope they take some pride and a sense of accomplishment of seeing that.
The 2 SpaceX astronauts joined 3 others today. NASA has yet to decide just how long they will be there. It depends on the status of the next SpaceX astronaut mission, which is set for August. Saturday's launch made history as the first human flight involving a private company. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.